Hey, Nirmalesh, thank you for coming in. You are amazing. You
Hi,
have
Steve.
just an outstanding background. You're continuing to do global contributions that are transformation across so many different dimensions, definitely interdisciplinary. And I just love all of the areas that you're involved in. And so we'll mine some of it. We won't have time to mine all of it, but we'll mine some of it. So thank you for coming in, Nirmalesh.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. Thank you very much.
So nevertheless, my audience tends to skew, very senior executives and things like that. And they always ask me, what are those magic moments in the amazing people you interview? What were the inflection points in your life early on that created this amazing life you have and career and contributions you made? And it could have been something that happened when you were like 3 or 5. It could have been mentorship. It could be something in school. It could be any number of things that really shaped and guided you to the path you're on today.
Yeah. Um, um, I I did all of my education at a very young age away from home in international schools. Um, and always what gave me purpose was linking to a vision, right? As a kid, what vision do you have? You just I learned to think beyond my means. For example, I never got good grades, but I always was great in executing projects, right? And that gave me purpose more than any grades I could get. And that went on to me carrying out that throughout my life, my higher studies, my time doing my PhD. It was always how do I get results rather than how do I get validation for those results. And I stuck on to that. And I think that changes things when you get invested in the purpose rather than just the action. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. But you have such a science orientation. Did you get that from your family or from teachers, or what instigated that, or was a catalyst for your science orientation?
I would say curiosity. So, uh, I had great teachers, but always end of the day, curiosity, just questioning what was taught to me. Why should something be like this? Why was, a law in physics meant to be this way? And when you become curious, you start discovering things for your life. And just to the aspect of it, things seem to be different when you start questioning it fundamentally rather than just accepting what you're told. Uh, I love science. I have a science background, but I'm not in science anymore because I believe what you fundamentally study there can be applied in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see this transdisciplinary, but also this idea of translational work, right? So, and in fact, I just came back from the Terasaki Institute for Biomedical Innovation. We had a leadership board meeting, and they're focused on the translation part. So not just the theory and the research, but how can we make use of it in a practical sense that will be used by people to improve their lives in many ways. And I can see that in you and what you're doing. So when you earlier indicated that you weren't just interested in getting good grades or
Mhm.
having the kind of validation, you wanted to say, oh, how could I use this? How could I and in fact in kind of sort of entrepreneurial lingo, we call that translational research, right? How can I
Mhm.
take this work and apply it and create something out of it and make it useful? So that's uh, very evident in your background. And I can see how you're curiosity driven and you're always sort of pushing the boundaries. Um,
Mhm.
and I call those stretch goals. So you're always learning and striving. So, you got this undergraduate study of mechanical engineering, and then you end up doing additional studies. Can you talk about that educational journey? We'll spend a little bit of time about that, and then we'll get into how taken that educational journey and translated that into, practical products and
Mhm.
services and so on.
So, One quote which stuck with me from my father was, as a kid, I was always pushed to do music, to do sports. And he always said, I'm not expecting you to be a musician, but I want you to understand music enough to appreciate what it is. And that stuck with me. So when I started doing mechanical engineering, I knew that mechanical engineering could also help me tomorrow when I go into biotechnology. So it was not just me trying to become specialist in a field, but when you have trans, when you have knowledge from different fields collide, you innovate at a different level, right? We live in a world where you don't see any innovation that's happening just because of one idealistic field. So this stuck on with me. When you start to appreciate things for what it is, and then you move on into a new field, you see that field in a new light. And that's what helped me the best because when I took engineering into, biology, it was different. The way I saw nanoscience, how I perceived the projects I did, the work I did there was beyond anything else could have given me. And I think that is very key. And that also comes into my work. How do you take research happening, say, in medicine, and to apply it in the real world, you don't need just the knowledge of medicine anymore. You need to understand people, you need to understand society, economics. So I think these transfield knowledges helps you get there.
That's really fascinating. So you got this understanding of sort of classical engineering in a sense, because mechanical engineering is very classical, and yet you find that it opens up new pathways or doorways or ways of looking at things when you got into your master's in nanoscience and biotechnology. And then you decided to follow that up with quantum nanoscience. And so it's just fascinating. And then science and technology management. So again, it just opening up more sort of pathways or perspectives of
Mhm.
translational work and interdisciplinary work. Uh, what attracted you to the quantum side of nanoscience?
Uh, Looking back at it, I think me going into, quantum science was, I thought it was the right thing to do based on what my peers did, right? Looking back at it, I, I think that's why I made the decision. But if I could go back, I would never change it. Because when I went into doing quantum science, um, you had to fundamentally break limits of what, see, the project I did is how can you measure um, say current at a atto scale, right? But your physical devices couldn't help you get there. Uh, if I didn't have the understanding of classical engineering, I couldn't have understood what I was doing, right? So me just going into this field helped me perceive things in a different way. Uh, I learned how different fields could help me. So when I worked on atomic force microscopy, right? So I had control of the entire microscope. If a chip blew out, I had to sit down, solder it, understand how it worked. I understood how noises came into place. I understood how the system worked. Whereas my colleagues were just calling the service guy when systems broke down, right? So the fundamental understanding of what happened came from my knowledge from classical mechanics. And I don't know, the lessons I learned during my PhD in quantum science still holds me to what I do. But I also realized that's not my field I wanted to be in.
And then you got into being an entrepreneur. I mean, you did a startup to make this next generation land devices, wide area land devices, and so on. So, what instigated that move to do a startup? Was it uh, purposeful and intention based to go into startups, or it just happened in some way? Or
My entrepreneurial journey was a discovery by accident. So I was a Marie Curie fellow during my PhD in Europe. And as part of the fellowship, you had a stipulation that you're supposed to be engaged in activity in fields other than you're specializing in. So I was in science, and I had to do either advanced German course or go into entrepreneurship. So I thought doing entrepreneurship in the French Riviera was good. That was the reasons I started it. But then as I was going through it, I went there with amazing people who had similar thinking like me. And it was something we came up on the spot. The entire project or entire product that we launched came entirely designed and developed it in about 30 odd days, right? And then the fascination of how you take technology and apply it was the hook for me because I was used to just looking at things technically, how things work, curious on how things, were developed. But then you go into this entrepreneurial journey where they said, so, okay, now you have a product. How do you make people use it? Right? How do you look at a revenue model? And my co-founder was like, we cannot do a sell business model where we make the product and sell it. So we started thinking outside the box. Can we start creating Wi-Fi clouds across the entire city and help people use it? And that's what gave me the hook. I thought, okay, this is what I want to do in life. And I remember I called my PhD supervisor and told him, you know what, I'm going to stay longer than anticipated. It's going to be a long break. I don't know why, but I don't feel like coming back. And it takes a second for you to know that, okay, this is what I want in life. And that happened for me in Nice. And that's why I took the entrepreneurial journey and I never looked back. So we started creating a product, people liked it. And even there were companies who were interested in the technology we developed. And uh, this changed my life. And then look back at it, um, I came to realize more than 95% of research done doesn't go beyond publications in journals, right? And a lot of solutions that are needed in today's world, there are not enough people to translate it into the real world. I've found that that's a need, okay, and that's the purpose I want to live by. That's why I moved into an entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, and it's quite remarkable. I mean, you create this next generation sort of wider area Wi-Fi LAN device, and the technology company Connectedness was acquired for its IP after just a few months of incubation. That's quite remarkable. And then that led you into this deep interest of deep tech and incubation. So you did a short stint as the incubation manager of TU Munich. What was that like?
Um, that was me stepping into a world of infinite unknowns. I didn't know anything about incubation. All I knew was how to, one instance of commercializing a technology, right? I had to learn everything from scratch. And it was it, it was never a work. I never looked at it as work. It was learning every day. It gave me purpose. The problems I faced on a day-to-day manner was very minuscule. Somehow I thought the work I did in my PhD was very easy compared to what I did as an incubation manager, right? Because you had to deal with people around you, you had to deal with how technology and ideas could become real life. And also, just it was the first time ever in my life I even just got into an office setting. And yeah, it was something I loved.
Can you describe? I mean, you were a catalyst for the creation of a bunch of startups. Can you describe one or two of those startups and what was really interesting about them at that time?
So, one startup was advanced uh, engineered membranes, right, in Belgium. So the idea they were proposing is um, if there's a potential difference on either side of membranes, you could create essentially power from a engineered membrane, right? So the thought was, what if we could place membranes where rivers meet the sea, right? You have huge potential difference at these regions, and can power be generated? It was not a successful startup, but it was an amazing idea, right? So what I learned from this is not every idea can be successful unless it's the right time and right space, right? It solves a lot of problems, it solves a lot of purpose, but when you go into translation or take it into making it a business, it doesn't hold. Okay. Um, and That's the thing with deep tech. Now you have a lot of new startups coming up with quantum computing, right? Um, you do not know what risk you're taking, but end of the day, it's worth the risk, right? If there's a flip at any point in time, it could change how we perceive reality. And these are these are the reasons, or at least this is why uh, I liked it.
Okay, so we'll get back to that. We're just going to spend a little bit of time to sort of mining your history, and I'll ask some sort of futuristic questions about
Yeah.
quantum and semiconductors and deep learning and so on. Now, you returned to India after doing all of this education, and you realize your hotspots, your sweet spots in your life are things like translational work, uh, being curious, being entrepreneurial. In fact, you found the entrepreneurial ecosystem, that kind of work, even more exciting than doing all the theory work when you're going for your PhD or your undergrad or your master's degrees, right? So I think that's really quite fascinating. And then you return to India and you get involved, and you were earlier involved with the Sona Group, the Sona College of Technology earlier for your undergrad degree. What led you back to the Sona Group?
So after realizing what I wanted to do in life, I also realized I need a mentor, right? And one of the mentors I was looking out was I came back home. I didn't know who I should, look at or learn from. And then I get a call from Choco, who is the chairman of the Sona Group. And he was like, I hear that you're in town. Do you want to come back and, have a conversation? It will be nice to have an alumni back at the campus helping us out. And it was not known then, but then I started working with Choco. Initially, it was just a few hours a week, but that was when I realized, okay, here's a man who does amazing things, and I need a mentor uh, in my life to, sort of guide me or shape me in the interest I have. And I had a decision then and there saying, okay, this is what I want to do. Let me start looking at it in a different perspective. And my time back with Sona College or the Sona Group, um, look, it was amazing because you had to solve fundamental problems in society that did not require any, deep tech or futuristic tech. All it needed was simple technology, adapted for what people wanted, right? And the projects I started working here was it changed the perspective of what it means to know things and what it means to apply those things for impact.
So it adds another dimension, right? And that is social good. In other words, you leveraging your knowledge, your experience, your training with incubators and all of the different sort of theoretical background, plus the translational tendency that you have, the love for translational work, and then adding a social component as well, because Chalk on the Sona Group and and Sona College of Technology has a lot of this sort of impact side to it. Can you describe maybe one of the platforms or products that you were part of creating?
Um, One of the very first projects that I worked on was a platform called Annadanam, right? Annadanam in Indian language or in Tamil specifically means um, you know, the charity of food, right? It's the only charity where people say enough, right? That was a cultural concept. So the idea was around COVID, we had a lot of chaos around the world. Everybody knows what happened. And in the community we were in Salem, India, Choco said, instead of just giving physical, in addition to giving physical money and things what people need, let's create a platform which helps them, right? So the idea was uh, can we create a platform where NGOs come to work together, but at the same time function individually? And these are specifically food waste and food lost NGOs, right? You had a lot of people going hungry on one side. On the other side, you have NGOs who had food but couldn't get it to people in a right way, right? Say, for example, if a county needed, say, 1,000 meals in a day, there would be three NGOs going there with 3,000 meals, and which would still not solve the purpose. So the idea was, where do you find a social demand, and how do you direct NGOs and other stakeholders to that place? That was the initial idea. But then it transformed as we were developing it, it transformed to the thing called, can we develop a platform that deals with food loss and food waste in different scenarios, not just feeding people who are hungry, right? And you know the data of how food loss and food waste is impacting our world, and how the FAO has been constantly um, telling us on the steps we need to take. But I think Anadaram was the first project that grounded me, right? Not any project I did in Europe, or not any platform I developed in Europe even gave me the sense of purpose. And here realizing, when people could just, you know, get their hunger lost or get fed for a meal gave me more satisfaction than, I don't know, doing projects or having my own startup.
And that adds another dimension to your continually evolving sort of a worldview and landscape of the skills and capabilities you have. And you also co-authored this book. Can you tell me more about that?
So some of the projects which I worked on with Choco was uh, working around uh, waste and how to make waste into wealth, right? So you have poor communities in India which struggle to make ends meet. And you also have women who tend to take care of the family's income while men have migrated to metro cities. So the idea was, what projects can we give to women in rural communities in India so that they can become more self-sustaining, right? So one of the projects was, you have a lot of waste, food waste, say tomatoes. They're wasted, they're just dumped. The idea was, can we build low-cost solar dryers, help them make sun-dried tomatoes, something this simple, but it changed lives of women. They could become independent in terms of how they supported their families. And projects like these, we thought we needed to put it in writing, make people understand how they could do simple, impactful projects, at the same time help communities thrive. And I co-authored a book with Choco where we wrote about the framework that we used in a chapter, and then we talked about the different case studies of the different projects we did. And all of these are real projects in communities and how we scale them up. And putting all of this down in writing gave it uh, a much more better perspective. Because after that, we had people who were interested to start working with us. They were also interested to see how their little projects could be scaled up. And uh, this was wonderful.
Yeah, and then so the book becomes like a North Star, a guide, a template, a model that can incentivize and act as um, a light for others to follow, and therefore you can scale these ideas, right, of impact and social good, community driven, and so on, because you have models in there that people can say, yeah, that's a great idea. I could do something similar, or it
Mhm.
would incentivize them to think in these kinds of ways. So you're really scaling this creativity that's occurring when you're working with Choco. I know that you got involved with this Global XPRIZE, and can you talk about how that came about?
It was unintentional. So, Choco, Choco and myself, we were just discussing one day, and he mentioned a newsletter from YPO talking about the X Prize, AI X Prize that was running at the time. And I believe there was an paragraph which said if anybody would like to mentor or sponsor X Prize team, it would be good. And Choco was like, "Do you think we could work with any XPRIZE teams?" And I started looking at what XPRIZE was, and I realized I told Choco, there's an XPRIZE coming up for rapid reskilling. We have been in the skilling field for quite some time. How about we participate in it and see what difference we can make? And I think when we started off, Choco and myself, we were very doubtful in terms of we don't understand the structure of WDBs, we don't understand how skilling is done in the US, and also it's an X prize. But at the same time, we also were invested in the vision, right? If we could solve the reskilling problem, the quantum of impact would be great. And that's how it all started. And then Choco brought in some of the great people I've seen so far in my life from YPO, Tom Rittler, Suresh Parekh, Komal Parekh. All of these people, uh, I don't know, I learned a lot from them. Each of them are individual people who create impact in their own communities. But when leaders like this come together and work on a single purpose, I saw how things could change and the difference we could make. And that's how my whole journey with XPRIZE started. And it was a 2 year journey, and the learnings across these 2 years was amazing.
And there's a team called Hiremee, or a company called Hiremee. Can you talk about Hiremee?
Yes. So, Hiremee started off with a simple idea. It was with a phrase saying, um, find your diamond, right? In India, you have this culture where companies hire from universities that are in metro cities, right? Because it's much easier for these students to start working in the offices, which are also in metro cities. And Chaka had this vision where he started with a fundamental question. You hire from the top 50 colleges, but what if your diamond or your suitable employee was at the 51st college, right? This is the idea it came. You are not giving people opportunity there. But then as we were going through the idea, it came to a different perspective. Every student, after they finish their study, they undergo this cruciating process of finding jobs, right? So they face more rejections than acceptance. Everybody. So even if, say, a company comes into hiring somebody, they hire, say, 5, 10 people out of 100, and the remaining 90 people feel rejection. So the Jaime was set up in such a way that what if we could take out rejection from the process of hiring? What can we do by making hiring, nationalized or decentralized? So we started assessing students, looking at how can we uh, place suitable students or capable students to appropriate jobs, irrespective of where they lived in the country. So we identified talent from rural cities, in rural villages, and linked them with employers who are in metro cities. and it made a difference to many people. So it came to the point where let's go beyond just recruitment. Let's help them get skilled. And as of today, I would say Hiremee has touched up to say 4 to 5 million people. And this is a social venture. That's the impact which I came to realize working with the Sona Group.
So what Hire Me does is you could be a student, and it doesn't matter where you are because it's online.
Yep.
You can put your profile up in some way and make yourself discoverable. You have employers who are also part of that platform. And because you have the two principals there in communities, you can join them
Yeah.
using technology. And so that diamonds everywhere can be employed, and even rubies as well. Doesn't have to be
Yes.
diamonds, right?
Yes.
Because everybody has some kind of intrinsic value they can bring to a company, just finding that right. And so you
Mhm.
created a skillings program, a matching system as well. And that was part of the competition as well, right? What that work that you were doing became part of your project in the Global XPRIZE $5 million rapid reskilling competition. Is that
Mhm.
correct? Or
Yes. I mean, Hiremee was doing a lot of this work. So in part of XPRIZE, you, as you know, the format, they have a specific way in which the competition is held. And we had to work with, say, the workforce development boards in the US, right? Hiremee did not have experience of working in the framework of the WTBs.
right,
And I truly believe that this was the advantage we had because we entered into the system uh, without knowing how things are done.
right.
We did not have a context to what is the right thing to do, what is the wrong thing to do. We just saw things for what it was. And that is key when you want to solve a problem. Because when you have a preconceived notion or a story of what is, you're limited by the possibilities, right? And when you're an outsider, you come in, you see things, and you start questioning fundamentally, why should it be done this way? It doesn't make sense. Let's create a solution that challenges that. Let's create a solution that's truly only needed for the end result or the end goal rather than, piecing together everything that everybody else looks at. And I think this gave us the advantage.
Yeah, and you end up getting into the finals, which is amazing in this global program. And so what is it like to be in the finals? Do you have to do a pitch or something where the finalists appear, or how does that work?
So the competition had multiple rounds, right? So the first, you are selected into the competition based on a document or a proposal you give them. So they give you the problem, and then you just give a proposal on how you propose to solve the problem. You come in, and then the first one was there were 10 different teams from across the globe that were selected. And Hiremee happened to be the only team from Asia at this round, right? And then we have to develop a solution, implement it, and we are judged based on the impact. So the idea was, can you skill 500 people in a given community working together with the WTB? We worked with the Massachusetts Workforce Development Board. The first call I remember having with them, we said like our goal as part of the competition is to train 500 people uh, to become medical assistants, right? And we had to accomplish this in say 3 months. And the head of the WDB was like, I can give you 50 people in 4 weeks. I cannot give you more than that. He says, I cannot find people who are ready to get skilled. And he said various problems on why that is true. And all we heard was um, they are not doing everything needed, right? It's not something they're doing wrong. It's just that can we approach the problem from a different point of view? And we started approaching candidates ourselves directly. And I remember we had about 400 or 450 candidates enrolled on our platform. Um, about 1,700 were identified at first level. And the WDBs were surprised. They said, we didn't know you could, even so many people were available for training. And this changed. And after that, we trained them, we had to place them in jobs. And we also had to check retention. How long did these skilled employees retain their jobs? Based on this, you go into the finals. And in the final round, you had to scale up the solution you had for 5,000 people across the country, right? And the very interesting thing was we were just happy to be in the top 10, that is, just be qualified in. And we thought we were doing great. And then when they were announcing the results of who the finalists were, we were surprised. We were the only non-American team part of the competition in the finals. And we were also the team that were leading among all finalists, right? And in the entire time we had to implement the solution in the US in XPRIZE, I've never stepped foot in the US, Stephen. I was leading the whole project and I did not go to the US at all. And that was amazing. You get to know how technology can break barriers, even physical barriers. You can impact people irrespective of even being present in places. And that's a possibility that opens so many doors for you.
Yeah, well, that's such an amazing experience and a story to tell. And the fact that you use a novel approach. I mean, you had to approach it from, we had to learn what
Yeah.
the environment was like and start from scratch. And like you said, it gave you an advantage because you didn't have preconceived ideas or biases and so on. I wish we could go on for another hour, but we're limited in time here. We don't have too much time left, and I've got to cover some more areas. So I want you to talk about being the director at Sona College of Technology and the programs you're leading. That's one question. Another question will be about the fiber project, and then your Mycelium project, and then I like to do a little bit of future talk questions. So hopefully you can get that in at about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But okay, so first of all, you're a director of the Sort of College of Technology.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the college and what does your role entail at the college?
So to let me rephrase that, I hold positions within Sona College, but also I'm just part of the Sona Group, right?
Right.
So the Sona Group in per se, it's a century-old family office, which is very centered on impact. So you have an educational institute, which is a non-profit institution, which is a charity actually, and then you have a for-profit company, which is We Technologies. So the idea here, what I do is, how can we have, technology developed at a college, and how can we use them for impact, right? How can we relate or create a network of industry, academia, and research institutes and start functioning in unison? That was the primary goal in which I work with the Sona Group. So the fiber project, the work at Sona College, all of them, entails or comes down to one single vision, right? How do you take technology and how do you create impact, right? So the fiber project works with a lot of universities and hospitals in Canada, where we look at wearable technology. In order to get this done, we have researchers at Sona College who contribute along with researchers in Canada to bring out a solution, right? So most of the projects or every project I work on is in a similar fashion. How do you create impact by bringing people together? And essentially, that is how the world ideally functions. So my point here is I have the liberty or the stance to work on projects that I like. I don't think this freedom is easily given in an organization. And me looking at Choco as my mentor, was the right decision I've done because he gave me the platform. He understood what I could accomplish. He gave me the platform. He said, leverage everything you see fit to accomplish any goal you see fit. He did not define what needs to be done. And this gave me immense power in working on the various projects you said. Uh, and yeah, that's that's it.
Well, you're the CEO of this Mycelium. Can
Yeah.
you talk about Mycelium Sona Biotech?
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, by the way.
So about a few years back, we were presented with this opportunity where we could, you know, have a joint venture with Mycelium Biotechnology, an Australia-based company that worked on mushroom-based biotechnology, not just in supplements, but also leather packaging, alternative meat. So they did products using mushrooms and mycelium, and this was uh, new. Nobody understood what mushrooms were, and in India, mushrooms are not very popular. And looking at this project, uh, I saw potential in terms of the things we could accomplish. Right, the mushroom at the end of the road. So we were looking at how we could help with nutrition, pharmaceutical science, and in discussions, uh, the idea was, can we establish a manufacturing facility in India in Salem? So I had the experience of establishing something from scratch. This is where my background from classical engineering came into place. I had to sit down with engineers to plan the mechanical and electrical lining of the entire facility. I understood what needed to be done. Then biotechnology came into place where I had to understand mushrooms, I had to understand what was needed. And my understanding of the field helped me understand who were the best people who could join hands with me in getting the product successful, right? And then we went on to then go into how do you uh, create a technology product and then take it to market, right? And that's where my management came in and my experience with other projects came in. And now it is fantastic because we have a D2C product and we have a B2B product as well. And having both of them go forward at the same time, the experience is unique. So uh, we create high performance nutraceuticals that help with biohacking. How can bioactive molecules from mushrooms uh, help people, get extraordinary performances from what they do? Athletes, runners, even businessmen in terms of mental clarity and focus. On the other hand, we also look at how can we create mushroom or mycelium-based products that could help with animal nutrition, moving away from antibiotics. And doing all of this at the same time, um, I would say that the path I had in my life just led me to the right place, and it's amazing just doing the work and learning things on the go, on the fly, actually. So which is good.
We're basically out of time. So we're going to have to do a follow-up so we can talk about quantum science, quantum biology. We can get into what's happening in the machine learning and deep learning and things like that, because the research labs that are within the Sono family, I mean, you're in everything, and you're definitely in AI machine learning. So unfortunately, we don't have time to mine that, but let's do a follow-up and we can get into more detail. I'm just going to ask then two more questions. The question about you're a fellow at the University of Oxford. How did that come about? And then your recommendations to the audience. So two questions. You're a fellow, and then your recommendations to the audience. And I'm just going to take a sip here.
So the UK Foreign Office has something called as the Chevening Awards. So they recognize talent across the globe in terms of science, research, and innovation. and also business. And we are invited as fellows to the University of Oxford, where we work with other fellows from around the globe in creating impactful projects. And I was uh, honored to be, uh, or at least fortunate to be chosen because of the various projects I did with the Sona Group. And on becoming a fellow at Oxford, my impact and the people I started working with was amazing. And I'm still continuing to do the work. So that is one. Uh, and the second question, Stephen, was
And
the
then,
recommendation. Yes.
well, yeah, what would be your closing recommendations to my audience?
The one thing I would say is uh, unless you're invested in a vision, you cannot accomplish your goals. Goals become meaningless without a vision. And always vision needs to be impactful. Unless you touch people's lives, it doesn't matter. So I would say no matter what they do, as long as you link it to a vision, it's good. And second thing is, I just hope I learn from other people, just like yourself, Stephen, because the work you do is amazing. And thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you again, Nirmalesh, for coming in and sharing so many of your insights to my audience. You're just a marvelous person across so many different dimensions. In fact, you're unbounded in the dimensions. So thank you, and I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.